In this session, we continue our journey through one of the most crucial topics in plant physiology, respiration in plants. In the last video, we explored glycolysis and fermentation, the anaerobic ways in which cells derive energy. But what happens when oxygen is available? How do plants extract maximum energy from glucose? Let's dive into aerobic respiration and follow glucose as it takes the oxygen route. Higher alcohol content beverages require distillation or fortification after fermentation. But when it comes to cells, they aim to extract maximum energy, and that means complete oxidation. For this, organisms depend on aerobic respiration, which takes place in the mitochondria of eukaryotic cells and requires oxygen. Aerobic respiration ensures complete oxidation of organic substrates, releasing carbon dioxide, water, and a large amount of energy. This is the most common form of respiration in higher organisms and much more energy efficient than fermentation. Now, let's connect this to what we learned previously. Glycolysis ends with pyruvate in the cytoplasm. But for aerobic respiration, pyruvate needs to be transported into the mitochondria. Inside the mitochondrial matrix, it undergoes stepwise oxidation, releasing carbon dioxide and removing hydrogen atoms. The electrons from these hydrogen atoms are passed to molecular oxygen, and this transfer helps in the synthesis of ATP. This phase occurs along the inner mitochondrial membrane. Once in the matrix, pyruvate undergoes oxidative decarboxylation via the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. This enzyme system requires coenzymes like NAD positive and coenzyme A. During this reaction, two NADH molecules are produced from two pyruvic acid molecules. This step is a crucial link between glycolysis and the tricarboxylic acid cycle. As you can see the reaction, this conversion results in acetyl coenzyme A, carbon dioxide, and NADH. Each glucose molecule yields two molecules of acetyl coenzyme A, which now enter the tricarboxylic acid cycle or Krebs cycle. Acetyl coenzyme A combines with oxaloacetic acid and water to form citric acid, catalyzed by citrate synthase. Coenzyme A is released in this process. Citric acid undergoes isomerization, followed by decarboxylation steps, forming alpha-ketoglutarate acid, and then succinyl coenzyme A. During the conversion of succinyl coenzyme A to succinic acid, GTP is produced, which transfers its phosphate to ADP, forming ATP. Throughout the cycle, three NAD positive molecules are reduced to NADH plus H positive. One FAD positive is reduced to FADH2. Eventually, the cycle regenerates oxaloacetic acid, ready for the next turn. As you can see the reaction, this entire cycle can be summarized with the full equation involving pyruvic acid, NAD positive, FAD positive, and ADP. Per glucose molecule, only two ATP are directly synthesized in the cycle. But we gain 8 NADH plus H plus and 2 FADH2 in total from this stage. Yet, the large ATP yield we expect hasn't shown up yet. That's because NADH and FADH2 hold the energy that will now be converted to ATP. So how is this energy finally harvested? The electron transport system, ETS, located on the inner mitochondrial membrane, carries out the oxidation of NADH and FADH2. NADH is oxidized by complex 1, NADH dehydrogenase, and transfers electrons to ubiquinone. At the same time, FADH2 passes its electrons through complex 2 during succinate oxidation. Reduced ubiquinone, also called ubiquinol, is oxidized next. Electrons from ubiquinol are passed to cytochrome C through the cytochrome Bc1 complex. This complex is also known as complex 3. Cytochrome C is a small protein attached to the outer surface of the inner membrane. It acts as a mobile carrier, transferring electrons between complex 3 and complex 4. Complex 4, or the cytochrome C oxidase complex, contains cytochromes A and A3, along with two important copper centers. These electrons move from complex 1 to 4, and with each transfer, protons are pumped into the intermembrane space, creating a proton gradient. These pumped protons return through ATP synthase, or complex 5, generating ATP. 1-NADH yields 3 ATP, and 1-FADH2 yields 2 ATP. Although oxygen is essential, its role is specific. It acts as the final electron acceptor, forming water. Unlike photophosphorylation, where light creates the proton gradient, here it's the oxidation-reduction reactions, hence the name oxidative phosphorylation. ATP synthase consists of F1, which is the catalytic unit, and F0, which is the proton channel. For each ATP synthesized, 4 hydrogen ions pass through F0 back into the matrix. Did you know that it is possible to calculate the net gain of ATP for every glucose molecule oxidized? However, this remains mostly a theoretical exercise. These calculations are based on several important assumptions. First, that there's a sequential and orderly pathway functioning, where one substrate forms the next, and glycolysis, the citric acid cycle, and the electron transport chain follow one after the other. Second, that the molecules called NADH, which are produced during glycolysis, are transferred into the mitochondria and go through a process called oxidative phosphorylation. Third, that none of the intermediate compounds in the pathway are used to make any other substances. And finally, that only glucose is being used for respiration, with no other molecules entering the pathway partway through. But are these assumptions true in a real, living system? Not really. In living cells, all pathways work at the same time, not one after another. Substances are added or removed from the pathway as needed. ATP is used wherever and whenever the cell requires it. And enzymes are regulated in many different ways. Under ideal conditions, aerobic respiration of one glucose molecule can produce a net gain of 38 ATP molecules. Now, let's compare fermentation with aerobic respiration. Fermentation only partially breaks down glucose, while aerobic respiration completely breaks it down into carbon dioxide and water. In fermentation, there is a net gain of just 2 ATP molecules for every glucose molecule converted into pyruvic acid. But under aerobic conditions, many more ATP molecules are produced. Also, in fermentation, the molecule NADH is slowly converted back into NAD+. But in aerobic respiration, this conversion is quick and efficient. So, while fermentation works in low oxygen conditions, aerobic respiration is far more effective at generating energy. Now that we understand how glucose is processed during respiration, let's take a look at what happens when the cell uses other molecules like fats and proteins for energy. Glucose is the preferred substrate for respiration, with other carbohydrates typically converted to glucose first. However, various substrates can enter the respiratory pathway at different points. Fats are broken down into glycerol and fatty acids. Fatty acids are converted into acetyl coenzyme A, which enters the cycle, while glycerol becomes PGAL and joins glycolysis. Proteins are broken down into amino acids. After removing their amino group, these amino acids enter the pathway as pyruvate, acetyl coenzyme A, or at points in the citric acid cycle. While respiration is often called a catabolic process because it breaks down molecules to release energy, it also plays a role in synthesis. So, Since it helps both in breaking down and building up molecules, the respiratory pathway is better described as amphibolic, not just catabolic. We've seen how different molecules like fats and proteins can enter the respiratory pathway at various points. But how do we know which substrate the cell is actually using? This is where the respiratory quotient, or RQ, becomes important. The respiratory quotient is the ratio of the volume of carbon dioxide evolved to the volume of oxygen consumed during respiration. It helps us understand what kind of respiratory substrate is being used. When carbohydrates like glucose are completely oxidized, the RQ is 1 because the amount of carbon dioxide produced is equal to the oxygen consumed. When fats are used as the respiratory substrate, the RQ is less than 1. For example, the RQ for tripalmitin, a common fat, is much lower because more oxygen is needed to oxidize fat molecules than the carbon dioxide they produce. For proteins, the RQ is usually around 0.9. However, in real-life conditions, cells don't rely on just one type of molecule. They often use a mixture of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins at the same time. That's why pure RQ values are mainly observed under controlled experimental conditions. To wrap up, we covered how the electron transport system makes ATP, how the respiratory balance sheet adds up to 38 ATP, why respiration is both catabolic and anabolic, that is, amphibolic pathways, and how the respiratory quotient reveals which fuel is being used. We hope that you have understood the topic. You can now study chapter notes, watch video lectures and solve MCQ tests of this chapter on EduRev to ensure you score well in your exams. And that's not all. You also get amazing courses for maths, science, English, Hindi, and much more for NEET. Thank you.